Okay, great. So as I have mentioned in the past, we have the big rocks in our life and we have all the tiny little pebbles, and we very much want to have approaches to balance the big and the little. And the approach to manage the big is something that we're all very familiar with. That is prioritization. We prioritize the big rocks in our lives. And we have chatted a lot about prioritization. But today is not about the big rocks. Today is about the tiny little details, the little pebbles. And as I've mentioned to you before, the approach with the tiny little detail, tasks and minutia, the goal is to stay current. And that will very much be a theme of today. I want to start off by sharing a story that stems back many, many years ago when I first graduated from my undergraduate degree. I took off with a bunch of friends to Europe, and we were backpacking across the continent and living on, I think our budget was $35 a day. That included room and board. I can't believe that we did that, but we did, and it was a fabulous summer. And as you can imagine, for any of you who've kind of traveled that way, I was carrying everything that I needed for the summer on my back in this backpack. And so therefore, I needed to be quite ruthless about what I decided to take with me. There was like literally 3 T-shirts, 2 pairs of shorts, a pair of jeans, a sweater. You know, there were very few multiples of anything. And as you can imagine, though, with this relatively small backpack and relatively few possessions, I was able to find things when I needed them. With a lot of stuff, as we experience in the workplace, a lot of information, a lot of papers, it's much harder to find things. But with very few possessions, it's easy to find things. Generally speaking, someone I traveled with had a bit more trouble finding things. So as much as she only had as much stuff as I did, like few possessions other than that extra pair of shoes that I really was quite jealous of back then, but she relatively had few possessions. But she did struggle with what we had coined back then, the black hole. She, as try as she might, she would lose a key thing, possession, like an umbrella or a sock or, her shampoo. She would lose these things into what we call the black hole of her backpack. And eventually she would find it, but she just struggled to put her fingers on that key thing that she needed at the time she needed it. And I often think about this black hole when I'm in people's offices and when they struggle to put their hands on information that they need at that time. And that is really the goal with all of our organizing efforts. The goal is not to make our office look beautiful and be aesthetically pleasing. It very much is aesthetically pleasing when we are organized, but the goal is really to be able to put our hands on the information or the tool that we need when we need it, and to not spend time looking, but rather spend time doing. So organization is a huge challenge today because we are dealing with so much more information. Unlike when I was backpacking through Europe and I really only had, say 30 possessions to my name, and that included kind of everything under the sun that I needed. Now we're dealing with hundreds, if not thousands, of disparate things that we need to have systems around. So we are dealing with so much more stuff that it makes organizing a huge challenge. And layer on top of that the fact that we are all extremely busy. We have very demanding jobs, and we're torn in many different directions that we don't necessarily have the time to invest in organizing as well. So today what I want to really lay out is a very
Welcome to GoToWebinar, Web Events Made Easy.
Pull up a polling question here, and I'd like to just check in with how organized you are. Now, those of you who are dialing in obviously can't participate in this poll. I have a good sense of how organized many of you are, though. Like I said, I've chatted with you. But I'd like to ask you to just pick here. Are you super organized, i.e., ready to take over and teach this session? Are you mostly organized? Are you, as we say in French, comme ci, comme ça, some things organized, some things not? Is there a hint of organization buried under piles, or are you thinking systems? What systems? What are you talking about? Okay, so a lot of people are marking themselves pretty close to the middle here. And I certainly know that there is a range out there. Okay, so with organizing, I like to think of two different dimensions with organizing. So you could be someone who loves organizing, like me. I do, call it a character flaw, call it a positive trait, which is how I like to think about it. But, for better or for worse, I love to organize. It's actually one of my greatest joys in life. I recognize that there are some people at the other end of the spectrum who are just, dreading the thought of organizing. The other continuum that we layer on top of that are the people who kind of know what to do, and then the other end of that spectrum is don't know exactly where to start, how to get organized. So if you are someone who loves to organize and has the know-how, then I like to call you an organizing star. So good job, pat yourself on the back. If you love organizing, you're just not quite sure where to start and you need some more direction, then you are a soon-to-be-discovered star. You guys are like, if you're in this quadrant, then you are like the One Direction guys just years before Simon Cowell discovered them. If you have the know-how, you know what it takes to organize, but you're just not too keen on it, you dread the organizing, then I would call you the uninspired. And I'm hoping that during today's call that I will help to inspire you to get organized. Now, however, if you don't know how to get organized and you also dread the thought of it, then I would call you that kicking and screaming participant today. And I would again say, let's work on both the inspiration and the know-how. So let's just check in. Where do you see yourself? What quadrant do you see yourself in? Are you an organizing star? Let's pull up another polling question here. Are you the soon-to-be-discovered organizing star? Are you the uninspired? Or are you the kicking and screaming participants? We just are waiting for the technology to catch up with our poll here. There we go. Okay, so go ahead and pick your answer for those of you on the webinar. Okay, good, good. I'm seeing a lot of soon to be discovered. Okay, great. So I am glad to see that because the biggest thing that the biggest driver of success is the positive feeling around organizing. So that's fantastic, and we can very easily get your know-how higher up there. So today's goals include two things. One, very quickly I want to talk about why we should bother getting organized. And this will be a quick discussion. I think that we all agree that there are benefits to getting organized. But then we're going to get really into the how. And I'm going to try and go through this quickly. And certainly I do welcome any questions throughout, but I don't want to over-orchestrate this. I think the key is to keep our organizing systems as simple as possible. Once we have set up your organizing systems, we want them to just function seamlessly in the background. We want you to be able to maintain them with relatively little effort so you can focus more on doing your fantastic work. So 3 reasons why organizing is necessary is because it avoids us losing all sorts of time spent looking for things. Now, there are a ton of various quotes out there. Some of them seem to be based on more robust research than others, but I saw a general trend around people losing somewhere in the range of 3 to 5 hours a week, and that adds up to weeks and weeks in the year. And I saw some quotes talking about losing 3 hours a week, 3 weeks a year. Other quotes talking about losing up to 7 weeks a year. Just spent looking for information. Now, this particular quote, Wall Street Journal, we saw variations of this quote many times out there as we were doing our research. And I don't think that we are losing close to half of our day just by nature of not being organized. But I would suggest that when you look at all the productivity principles that we've discussed throughout this program, that I think that people are losing a good chunk of their day, and it could be close to half. But I show this quote merely to get us all to kind of more for shock value for us all to say, hey, like this is a big deal. This is a very big deal. We're losing a lot of time when we're not organized. Okay, so if we move on to distraction number 2 on slide 11, or drawback number 2, another thing that being disorganized results in is that we have tons of distractions and we end up doing kind of lower value activities when we should be working on our main priorities, and it also makes it much easier to procrastinate. So one of the things I'll talk about today is, one project on your desk at any one time, and, avoid having those tempting distractions all over the place. And the final drawback on slide 13, which should be labeled as drawback number 3, is that it certainly does increase our stress level when we are surrounded by clutter and chaos. It makes us feel like we're out of control, and being in control is one of the top 3 drivers of self-motivation. So it is really critical for us to ensure that we are leveraging and ensuring that we have that sense of control over our job. There's a great book called Drive by Daniel Pink, and it talks about motivation. And control is listed as one of the top 3 things that drives our sense of satisfaction on the job. As well, when I think back to my MBA, one of the key lessons that really stuck with me after all these years is my organizational behavior prof mentioning that the #1 thing that we all want on the job is a sense of control. And being organized really helps to deliver that sense of control. We don't feel like we're surrounded by chaos with this backlog of unfinished projects. So we want to lower our stress, feel that sense of control by being organized. And as well, we're projecting a more kind of pulled together image, professional image, which does make a difference in the workplace. Okay, so now let's move on to the how of organizing. How do we get organized? So there really is a very simple secret, and that it's all around having a great system for all the different things you're trying to organize. There is no magic in this. It's not like anyone has the talent that you may feel like you're lacking, but it's all about creating good systems. And if you're struggling to organize something right now, if there's kind of a corner in your office or a corner in your house that just is always chaotic, then what you need to do is create a better system for it. And I always come back to my car keys, my key ring where I keep all my different keys, and I very much have a system around my keys. There's a hook by the garage door, and that's where my keys go. And if I choose not to use that system, like if I choose to slip them into my briefcase or put them into my suit pocket or, put them on a counter somewhere, that might work and it might not work. Sometimes I might find it the next morning when I'm rushing out the door. Other times, if I, let's say, leave them on a counter, then the 4-year-old, our little guy, could get a hold of those keys, and then it's really anyone's guess where those keys are going to end up. We literally once found a phone in the dryer one time, and it took us a day and a half to find the phone. It was on, so we couldn't use it until the battery died. But we couldn't use the phone and the other lines until the battery died. So that was a bit of a kerfuffle at our house, right? All a simple little thing. So we have to go back to the system. And as much as keys is something that should really just function in the background of our lives, we don't want to put a lot of energy into our keys. If we leverage the system, then we don't have to put a lot of energy into our keys. But obviously, if we can't find our keys when we're trying to get out the door, then that's a real pain. So it's all about systems. So the best system across the entire productivity program is to establish a world-class to-do list. And I know we've talked about this already, and I hope that everyone already feels very proud of their world-class to-do list. If your to-do list is not yet at world-class standards, then we need to come back at this. So we want your to-do list to adhere to the 5 C's. Those C's being everything is centralized in one central location, so no more